Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Tonight, my guest is Ebo Entsuah. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Magdalene, for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me on the show.
Definitely. So, you are a city councilman in Florida, and I've actually been wrong about everything that's ever happened politically in Florida. It's a place I just don't understand. I don't know what it is. So, just to start off, how did you get involved in politics in Florida? Because it's a state that has real Democrats and real Republican representation. It's definitely not a solid state either way.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's honestly kind of crazy. It's funny that you mentioned that you're wrong about it because almost everybody is.
Yeah.
Nobody knows Florida. Even Floridians don't know Florida. So it's definitely one of those interesting states, but it's fun to live in. It's a great place to be. You know, our governor's doing great things. And honestly, the way that I got involved was I guess you could say chemistry. I actually, when I was in undergrad, I thought I wanted to be a chemist. I thought I wanted to go to pharmacy school. And then I realized that chemistry was not my thing. And I kind of switched over. So I was like, I like talking to people. I like being involved. My parents have always been service led. My
Mm-hmm.
mom's a doctor, dad's an engineer, and they're also missionaries. So for me, it's always been one of those things where serving people in public service has always been something that's close to my heart. So graduated with a degree in international affairs and
Mm-hmm.
sociology, and then afterwards went off to Washington D.C. to intern and kind of learn the ropes. So I did about 2.5 years in D.C. Just working in federal politics and advocacy, and then shortly after decided that I wanted to come back home and just get more involved at the local level.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got into the whole politics realm. So many people are always like, I never would have imagined you in politics. And I was like, hey, neither did I.
Yeah. And I like the fact that there's a trajectory. You were in college, you were an athlete, then you were a legislative aide. What was really the driving force in getting you from being an aide to Ron DeSantis to now being an elected office yourself? Because a lot of people want to stay within the being an aide system. They want to move from being an aide to being a campaign chair and so on.
Yeah, so it's honestly kind of funny. I tell everybody after my time in Washington, D.C., you see so much happen at the federal level and you
Mm-hmm.
hear so much happen, but nothing really happens. You know
Right.
what I mean? It feels like a lot of stuff is going on, but at the end of the day, a lot of the local residents aren't really seeing as much of the blowback that you see that happens on TV or on Twitter or on social
Mm-hmm.
media. So for me, I was his aide for a bit and I kind of decided, hey, look, I want to actually do something that's tangible and actually show results, and actually, see the product of what I've, studied and what I've researched and what I've done. So I kind of decided to come back home. I spoke to elected officials at the local, county, and school level just to see, where I could have an impact the most. Public service, like I said before, is what's on my heart, and it's not for everybody. And everybody
Right.
has own level that they would like to get to, or they where they can find themselves doing the most. So at this stage right now, I felt that the local level is where I needed to be. So I decided that that's where, I wanted to jump in head first and become an elected official.
And what was that process like? Because I understand there was a runoff involved. You had several different tries at it. So it was not, it wasn't like an AOC thing where you were just all of a sudden at the top and you didn't have that body of political experience in it. So why were there so many obstacles in that process? And what did you learn from that?
Yeah, it's like what Frederick Douglass says, just you know, having to go through things and persevere and kind of get to the next step is was definitely the hard part. For me, like I had in my head, I had this kind of idea of, oh, I'm gonna be on council by this age, I'm
Yeah.
gonna hit that next level by this age, and then start a family by this age and be good. And then, I started it and it didn't go anything like that. This time that I got elected was actually my third run at it.
Yeah.
The first time I ran, I was an absolute no name, lost by almost 3,000 votes. The second time I ran, a little bit of name recognition here and there. We were knocking on doors, hit over 3,000 doors in my community, and lost by 300 votes. So we actually weren't even going to run this time. But just from talking to my family and my friends, they kind of encouraged me to do it. And I kind of decided, you know what, let's persevere. Let's do it one more time. And ended up winning a special election by 3,000 votes,
Yeah.
so you kind of see how the progression kind of goes and how it kind of turned out. There were a lot of times where I was like, maybe I'll just go back to advocacy, or
Right.
maybe I'll just go back to, helping out in other campaigns, or just doing policy work, but decided to do it one more time, kind of really got our policies across, and the voters responded. So.
And in those races, I've spoken to a lot of young people who want to run or they run once and they get disenfranchised. What did you learn strategy wise from those races? Was it that you were focusing too much on social media or that there needed to be more community involvement? What did you take away that other people could look at for their races in the future?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And especially at the local level, social media is definitely a giant arm that you can use, but at the same time, it shouldn't be the only tool you have.
Right.
I found that my first two runs were huge on social media. I was getting the hits coming in, we had ads that were flowing, we had a newsletter, but it still wasn't producing tangible results. I
Mm-hmm.
found that actually getting into the community, talking to your community leaders, and actually being a presence in those rooms, in those back rooms, is what aided me the most. And um, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but I feel like there's a lot of groups that aren't really getting that at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is about being in the community, having a face in the community, and not just using talking points.
Yeah, and I saw on your Instagram you have photos prior to COVID, I guess, of being at events, of interacting with voters. You had your own mailers, and that's something that I think we need more of in politics in general. Was there anybody that taught you campaign strategy or taught you or you were influenced by on how to run a campaign? Because I do think we have a bit of a mentorship gap in that area for new arrivals, people running for elected office.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. So like I said before, I kind of did speak with other elected officials to kind of pick their brain and see
Mm-hmm.
exactly what they thought worked best for them, and what they felt they didn't really need. But even other than that, I kind of went through a process of trial and error to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
If you look back and see at my first run, and just even social media posts I was doing, mailers I was doing, compared to the ones that I'm doing now, there's a heck of a difference. I definitely felt that, and I definitely found that, people responded to things that were more detailed, not really
Right.
broad, like I said before, not really just using talking points, but having actually concrete ideals, and actually letting them know that you're a genuine person. But like you said, there definitely is a mentorship gap that we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing, and I've really tried my best to now, especially now that I'm an elected official, to kind of explore on that gap and see what we can do to kind of fix the link, and kind of help our local residents, county residents, and even the state residents too.
And on a local level, I've spoken to several people who are running for a congressional primary soon for 2022. There does seem to be a hunger for real content that I've noticed. Even if they're going along with an outsider perspective or they're using the same language, people are curious about what they're going to do with the economy, with healthcare, with immigration. In your area, what were those local issues that people were really focused on that you might even had to have explained more to people?
Yeah, no, excellent point. So the city that I'm elected, as I was elected in, or am elected in, is Clermont, Florida. It's right in Central Florida. We're a city of 45,000. In the past, we were essentially a bedroom community to the city of Orlando. But
Mm-hmm.
now we've grown so much. We've seen 10,000 people move in within the last 5 to 10 years, and that number just is continually growing. So for us, some of the big things that people were really interested in and really wanted to know more about is obviously transportation, infrastructure, which not just necessarily roads, but telecommunications and water
Right.
and sewer as well. So those were some of the other issues, and then now we see education has become a pretty big issue too. And that's been one of my, education, energy, and the environment have been the three things that really drive me, and
Mm-hmm.
things that I've been trying to really drive home. With all the growth you see happening, a lot of times you see your wetland, you see your environment, you see the energy factor being impacted. So it's really important that we as a city are a lot more proactive than reactive in order to kind of remedy those issues that are coming up, and trying to also prevent the brain drain. And when we say brain drain, we essentially just mean that when cities have young adults and teenagers coming up and graduating, going off to school, preventing those students or having barriers that prevent those students from graduating and coming back and actually going somewhere else is
Right.
going to be key.
Right. And in Florida, I know that the environment is a really big issue. I've spoken to a lot of people who would like to be involved in Florida politics, and they don't really know how to tackle the question of the environment because so much of it is the daily life there because of the climate. Was the environment something that you had to research more about to be able to answer those questions, or was it something that you just had natural affinity for discussing with prospective voters?
No, I definitely had to do a lot of research, and even to this day, I can honestly say that there's still a lot more that I need to learn. Like I said before, education was kind of where I tipped my hat at,
Mm-hmm.
and with the environment, you really have to kind of just get down to the nitty gritty,
Yeah.
and kind of just learn as much as possible. My personal occupation right now kind of works in the environment and energy space, mainly pertaining to businesses, but it's still something that I'm growing in every day, and it's great because you've seen, now you'll see Florida is actually looking at the environmental issues a little bit more
Right.
and kind of pulling on the resiliency issue, especially with our wetlands and everything that we have.
And for people who have been sort of wondering, what is the power of local politics? Because there does seem to be such a massive focus on Democrats, Republicans, everybody on we have to take the House, take the Senate, we have to the presidency and the Supreme Court. But those places, unless they're doing massive bills or deciding huge cases, don't have a day-to-day impact in the same way local politics do. So at your level of local politics, what is the level of impact that you're having on your constituents' lives?
Yeah, no, so it's huge, like I said before, Clermont is a city of 45,000, and Lake County is even bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
In my city, we are about 70% white, 14% African American, 5% Asian, and then the list goes on and on. So for me, especially since our local politics are nonpartisan, excuse me, it was really important to kind of make sure that, even though I am a conservative, I would still need to appeal and put
Right.
policies forth that would help everybody. So sometimes the partisan can kind of get in the way, which is to be expected. But so many people say it, and it's so true. But all politics is local politics, or at least the majority of politics are local politics.
Yeah.
So making sure that our constituency knows that, hey, your local elected officials are the ones who are setting your property tax values, your property rates.
Right.
We're putting forth those ordinances that say, you can't drive past a certain speed on certain roads, or we have music ordinances that go on. There's so much that we can do, or so much that we do, that a lot of people don't really realize, and civics training needs to be more of a pressed issue just in general, not even
Right.
just at the local level, but just in general, because so many people come to us and they're saying things like, hey, you're messing up our healthcare. And you're like, well, sir, we don't do healthcare. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's something that's on a whole different level. So for us, it's really important that we're starting to, one, inform our youth, not just our youth, but our whole population about what we actually do and how we actually work. And our city has actually done a great job of doing that just through, various programs that we have. But, there's still a lot more that needs to be done. And, it's been my focus as a brand new councilman and, the youngest councilman in the last 20, 30 years, for me to kind of make sure that we have a strong presence in our citizens' minds.
Yeah, there definitely is an education gap in terms of people knowing which level of government takes care of what. And that's something I saw in high school as well. I didn't even really have a civics class until my senior year of high school, and it was an elective. So there's definitely that gap that's present. Florida politics is something that always captures national interest, whether or not it's state races or federal races. There's always some level of interest, probably because there's so many electoral votes. Why do you think so many people get what happens in Florida wrong? Because I've gotten it wrong so many times. I know many other people who have, and I've wanted to ask somebody from Florida in that system, what is it that we're missing? That we did Southerners, people from the North, we just don't get it.
Honestly, I think it's something in the water.
Yeah.
No, but Florida is an anomaly. Sorry about that. It's one of those states where so many people think they know it, but even if you're here, it's still tough to get a grasp on. A lot of things that happen are relationship based, so it can be tough from people who aren't actually there to kind of understand or get an understanding of what happens. So it can be tough. It really can be tough. And that's, saying for somebody who's one works in Florida politics now and who also works for members. on both sides of the aisle who are in Florida politics.
Yeah.
It really is hard to kind of get a sense of what really happens here unless you're on the ground.
Yeah. And I think that that's something we have to realize going forward, that we need more on the ground people acting as our links to strategy or our strategists. When
Mhm.
you were a legislative aide, obviously that was a time where there was a lot of different stuff going on. There was a heavy foreign policy presence, a lot of different bills being proposed. A lot of young conservatives and young Democrats who get into government, they seem to come out without really knowing a lot about what government is. They know a lot about campaigning or about social media. But did you find that you learned about the system of government when you were in there, when you were participating in it?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that aided me in kind of learning more about how government works. Sitting in on various meetings with research committees, sitting in on various meetings with just committees in general,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of get a really firsthand view of how things kind of work and how legislation actually goes. There's such a long process. Everybody talks about, the videos where it's like, oh, how a bill becomes a law, but
Right.
there's so much more behind the scenes that are going on that a lot of people don't understand, and a lot of backroom deals and whatnot. But it's one of those things where it's tough and it's complicated, and if you're not there, actually taking a look and seeing, it's hard to get a grasp of it. It
Yeah.
definitely is hard to get a grasp of it.
And I know that you were an athlete in college and you were very big into that community. I think in the young political world in general, there's this hunger for a camaraderie with other young people. And that can cause us to have these splinter groups and different organizations. Did you find that your experience in sports helped you to be a team builder? Because I would like to see more young people in politics across the board have some sort of outside training in team building or in relationships.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just having to go to work with people every day that, on the field and off the field, that
Mm-hmm.
you didn't know before, but you've built such a strong relationship with. You get to know their quips, you know what they like, you know what they don't like. It really did help me translate, not just, at a politics level, but just in life in general. You know what I mean? So it definitely is, you definitely do see a fracture in terms of different groups going on. But, I highly recommend, any young kid or anybody who's interested, get involved in some type of sports and some types of clubs, and kind of just see how you work well with other people, because I wouldn't be where I am today without those relationships, without the skills that I learned in various sports and various groups. I learning how to kind of collaborate with people and just bounce things off them. It's hard to do this kind of stuff alone, you know what I mean? And most people shouldn't have to do it alone. They should have at least some sort of support group that they can kind of talk to, that they can bounce ideas off of. When I ran, I had so many questions that I had no idea who to go to.
Right.
But I had people who were in my corner who were actually giving me good advice, real advice, to kind of set me straight if I thought I wanted to do something, or if I thought something might work. It's nice to have another pair of eyes on it, to kind of be like an objective pair of eyes on it, to kind of be like, hey, I don't know if this is a good idea.
Yeah, and I think that that's an interesting point, because a lot of times parents will, conservative parents or liberal parents will say to me, I want my child to be involved in a political group. And at this time, you may learn more as a young person being involved in a science club or football or some sort of outside activity.
Mhm.
And for those leaders in the community, especially in Florida, do you think that there is a large amount of leadership from people in the community who are not political figures that we may not be aware of? Because it seems like election after election, the endorsements that really matter are the sheriffs, are the small business owners, and not necessarily Obamas or Trumps.
Yep. Nope. You hit the nail on the head. So many people who are, I found this, there were so many people when I was campaigning, knocking on doors, talking to people, having those meetings, who are like, they're community leaders and they don't want anything to do with politics. You
Right.
know what I mean? They wouldn't endorse anybody. They would talk to you, they would tell you what they would like to see, but they're not endorsing anybody, not getting involved at any level. And it's key. We have a messaging problem. We have a relationship building problem. Instead of wanting to worry about, oh, I got XYZ who's endorsed me from a whole different state, from a whole different
Right.
part of the country. We're not focusing on the people who actually matter, the people on the ground, the people who are putting that work in. And those community leaders, they mean so much to the residents, that if you're not really in tune with them, you're not going to be in tune with the voting base, and in turn they won't be in tune with you when it's time to actually vote and hit the polls.
Where do you think this deficit, I think especially in the conservative side we have with building relationships, comes from? Because it seems to have originated really within the last decade or so. Prior to that, there was more community involvement. Where is this, where does the fault lie for this?
And it's a complicated issue. It's not a one size fits all kind of answer. But just so many people now are worried about the cult of personality.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of want to see that big name that comes out and is
Right.
hitting all those talking points and owning the libs and doing all
Yeah.
that stuff. But at the end of the day, that's not really what matters. That's not how tangible policy gets passed, and that's not how we see tangible results that are actually positively affecting residents for the future. I believe that our conservative values are the best way to kind of make America move forward. And it's not, on anybody on social media to kind of get those views across and hammer those views in. It's on me to show my residents, to show my elected, or to show my constituency how my values and how my policy will help them. So
Right.
it really is about getting down to the nitty gritty, putting our nose in the sand, getting to work and kind of actually producing tangible results. And we haven't had that for a while. There are some people who are doing that on the ground, but they don't see the support. There's
Right.
so many other people that are being supported that don't need to be in our movement. And it's really time that we take a look at ourselves, we take a look at our messaging, and we actually get down to business and actually put our nose to the grindstone. I've
Yeah.
always tried to be the type of person who's not the loudest in the room, the person that listens, the person that understands, the person that has a good grip on things, and then the person who kind of just builds those relationships and sees where we can come to a compromise and where we can actually get solutions based answers out there.
And when conservatives do that, we do tend to have more success, especially on local levels. That's how a lot of conservative governorships are won, by being that sort of constant presence. Because you are a young elected official, what have you found to be the topic or the strategy that gets the most young people to just listen to you, to just be willing to have a conversation with you, either when you're campaigning or after the fact?
That's a great question. For me, I think just being able to relate to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I try to be slow to speak and quick to listen. A lot of people have a lot of complaints and a lot of qualms, and they feel very strongly about them. And if you're not listening to them and you're just spouting off nonsense or like trying to get out there and hammer them with answers, they don't want to hear that.
Right.
It's about actually having collaborative movements and actually speaking with your residents and actually getting involved with the party. But we're not seeing enough of that being done. Especially at the young level. So many people see the discourse that's going on, see the fracture, and they don't even want to deal with it. So instead they're shunning everything and they're staying quiet. I've seen so much voter apathy from
Yeah.
people in my age. It's kind of disheartening, especially when I know these people have actual, you know, they have the ability to have great input on these issues that are happening. So it really is a time for us to kind of take a step back, analyze what we've been doing, and say, hey, where have we failed here? Where have we failed here? Where can we improve here? And we don't have enough people who are doing that.
Yeah.
So it's time for the younger generation to kind of step up, and put up and kind of, actually get back to work.
Yeah.
That's
And
that's what I keep hammering.
right. I think in the Republican Party, there does need to be that sort of generation changeover a little bit, at least in messaging and strategy, because our generation tends to know even more what people a little older than us care about, because we're in the houses, we're dealing with it. And just sort of in closing, there's been a lot of questions about where Florida will go in the next election series, because there was such a close race in the last one with DeSantis and his challengers and the Senate races. Do you think that Florida is trending more conservative or more logical? What's the situation there, the best that you can see it?
So I do believe that we're trending more conservative and more logical. But at the same time, I still feel like there's still a lot more work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
The base is energized even after everything that happened in January. But it's one of those things where it's time to kind of strike while the iron is hot.
Right.
Especially in Florida. It's time for our elected officials, myself included, to kind of really get back to our roots and really, go back to our grassroots, our community building, talk to the people. We
Mm-hmm.
don't have enough of that. And you know, I try to try to stay off social media as much as possible in terms and actually get out and talk to the people. But it has become a great tool that's being used. But it's unfortunate because sometimes you see elected officials who are on social media a lot more than they're in their city halls. You know,
Right.
so that's kind of the goal, and I think that should be the goal of every elected official these days. To actually talk to their constituents, get a sense of what's going on, and kind of build that way.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point because there is a bit of confusion amongst Republican voters who might think just because they see one person on TV all the time that they're doing the most work. And
Mhm.
oftentimes if you look at it, that's not really the truth. So what would be your advice to young people who want to get involved in politics and want to chart for themselves an elected official route, who are on Democrats, Republicans, either one?
Yeah, so my advice to them would be to reach out to your local elected officials as much as possible.
Hmm.
Try to be that fly in their ear to kind of, hey, how does this work? What do you do here? Can I shadow you? You know what I mean? I guarantee you they're going to be open to talking to you. If they're truly transparent and accessible, they will be 100% open to talking to you and 100% open to hearing you out and kind of giving you advice. That's kind of what I did. I came back home. I literally messaged every single one. I was like, hey, I'm a young guy from here, want to get involved. How can I help? What can I do? So that's kind of, even if you're not planning on running that year,
Hmm.
being that presence and having that presence, sitting in your city hall, sitting in your chamber halls, just listening. You don't even need to go up. You don't need to speak. Just go listen. Take the opportunity to think, hey, why are we doing this that way? I think I might do something else a different way. It really is the first step into getting, more involved and more organized, and kind of seeing where you want your trajectory to go.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense because a lot of times you can learn more, especially if you want to be elected in person from observing the process, because there might not be that level of civics knowledge versus being on social media. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people follow you on social media to keep up with you?
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Magdalene. And they can follow me at Ebo_Entsuah. So EBO_ENTSUAH.
Perfect. And we'll link all that below. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.